The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the cold light of distant stars. In this emptiness, a sight that would have terrified any civilized species slowly came into view. Ships, thousands upon thousands, of alien vessels moving together like a metal storm across the galaxy. The Kethran Empire's war fleet was massive beyond imagination. 100,000 ships of various sizes spread across space in perfect formation. Small fighter craft buzzed around enormous battleships like angry insects. Massive carriers held even more vessels in their bellies, ready to release death upon any world that dared to resist. At the center of this metal ocean floated the flagship Dominator. Its black hull was covered in weapon ports and armor plating, thick enough to stop nuclear weapons. Inside the ship's command center, Admiral Vex stood before a wall of screens showing his endless fleet. His 6 arms moved across control panels, while his 4 eyes scanned the data flowing past him. "Admiral," called out his communication officer, a younger Kethran with nervous movements, "we are approaching the human sector. Our scouts report a small colony on the 3rd planet of this system." Vex's mouth twisted into what his species considered a smile. "Humans," he said with disgust. "Such a young race. They have been in space for less than 300 of their years. Their weapons are primitive. Their ships are slow. This will not even be a proper battle." The Admiral had studied the reports about humanity. They were a species that seemed to prefer trade over war. Their colonies were small and peaceful. Their military was tiny compared to the great empires of the galaxy. Most importantly, they had never faced a real threat. The Kethran Empire had conquered over 200 species. Humans would be number 201. "Sir," another officer spoke up, "our forward scouts are detecting something unusual." "What is it?" Vex asked, not really interested. Nothing these primitive humans had could surprise him. "There is a single ship between our fleet and the human colony. It appears to be damaged and drifting without power." This got the Admiral's attention. He moved to the main display screen and saw the image his scouts were sending back. There, floating alone in the darkness, was a human vessel. It was much smaller than even his smallest destroyer, painted in dark gray that almost made it invisible against space. The ship looked battered, with scorch marks on its hull and no lights visible through its windows. "One ship?" Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "One damaged ship stands against my entire fleet? What do they call this vessel?" The scanner operator checked his readings. "The name painted on the hull reads Reaper, sir." "Reaper," Vex repeated the human word slowly. "How appropriate. It will soon learn what death truly means." Inside the human ship, Captain Jake Morrison sat alone on the bridge. The lights were dimmed to almost nothing, and most of the control panels showed red warning lights. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. His uniform was simple blue fabric, nothing like the elaborate armor worn by alien commanders, but Jake's eyes were calm. Too calm for a man facing impossible odds. "Ghost," he said quietly to the empty bridge. "Are you ready?" A soft voice answered him, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "All systems are online, Captain. The evacuation of Terra Nova colony is complete. The Reaper is operating at full capacity despite external appearances." Jake nodded. Ghost was the ship's artificial intelligence, more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The AI could think faster than any biological mind and control every system on the Reaper simultaneously. "How many ships are we facing?" Jake asked. "Exactly. 147 vessels of various classes," Ghost replied. "The Kethran appear confident in their numerical advantage." Jake almost smiled. "They should be. In any normal situation, they would be right." The captain stood up and walked to the main window of the bridge. Outside, he could see the approaching alien fleet. Ships stretched from one edge of his vision to the other, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. Any sane person would have run away or surrendered immediately. Jake Morrison was not most people. He had commanded the Reaper for 5 years, but he had never been allowed to use its full capabilities. The ship was humanity's most classified secret, built with technology that even Earth scientists did not completely understand. It had been designed for one purpose: to face threats that should have been impossible to defeat. "Ghost, open a channel to the Kethron fleet," Jake ordered. "Channel? Open, Captain." Jake's voice was broadcast across space to every ship in the alien armada. "Kethron fleet, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Reaper. You are approaching a human colony. Turn around and leave this system immediately. On the flagship." Admiral Vex heard the transmission and laughed so hard his officers looked uncomfortable. "Did you hear that?" he called out to his bridge crew. "One human and one broken ship is ordering us to leave." The Admiral activated his own communication system. "Human Captain, I am Admiral Vex of the Kethron Empire. You are facing 100,000 ships of war. Surrender now, and we will make your death quick." Jake's reply was immediate and calm. "I gave you a chance to leave peacefully. You chose not to take it." "What can one ship do against my fleet?" Vex demanded. "Let me show you," Jake said simply. The captain walked back to his command chair and placed his hand on a panel that had been dark until now. The panel scanned his palm, recognized his identity, and activated systems that had been sleeping since the Reaper was built. Across the ship, hidden machinery came to life. The hull began to change color from dull gray to a deep black that seemed to absorb light itself. Weapon ports opened along the ship's surface, revealing technology that looked nothing like human engineering. Energy began to flow through circuits made from materials that did not exist anywhere else in the galaxy. The Kethron sensors immediately detected the change. Warning alarms began sounding on every ship in their fleet as their instruments registered energy readings that should have been impossible. "What is happening?" Admiral Vex demanded. "What are those readings?" His science officer, a nervous creature with shaking hands, checked his instruments 3 times before answering. "Sir, the human ship is generating power levels equivalent to a small star. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Vex stared at the Reaper on his main screen. The small human vessel no longer looked damaged or helpless. It looked dangerous in a way that made his survival instincts scream warnings. "Impossible," he whispered. "They are a primitive species. Their technology is centuries behind ours." But even as he spoke, Vex knew something was terribly wrong. The Kethron Empire had never encountered a ship that could generate such massive amounts of power. Their own largest battleships would have been destroyed instantly if they tried to channel that much energy through their systems. "Admiral," his weapons officer called out, "should we attack?" Vex hesitated for the first time in his military career. Every instinct told him that the small human ship was somehow more dangerous than it appeared, but he had 100,000 vessels under his command. No single ship, no matter how advanced, could possibly stand against such overwhelming numbers. "All ships," he ordered, "target the human vessel. Fire a warning shot. Show them the power of the Kethron Empire." 50 of his destroyers turned their main guns toward the Reaper and fired simultaneously. Beams of pure energy, each one capable of melting through a mountain, struck the human ship from all directions. The weapons hit their target perfectly. For a moment, the Reaper was surrounded by explosions bright enough to light up the entire system. When the light faded, the human ship was completely undamaged. Jake's voice came across the communication channel again, still calm, still confident. "Is that the best you can do?" Admiral Vex stared at his screens in shock. 50 direct hits from destroyer-class weapons had not even scratched the human vessel's hull. The Reaper floated in space as if nothing had happened at all. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Jake Morrison stood up from his command chair and looked out at the massive alien fleet surrounding his ship. He had hoped they would listen to reason and leave peacefully. Now there was only one option left. "Ghost," he said quietly, "activate all weapons systems. It's time to show them what human engineering can really do." "Weapons online, Captain," Ghost replied. "Shall I begin with the entropy cannon?" "Yes," Jake said. "Let's make this educational." The silence that followed the failed attack was deafening. Across the Kethron fleet, thousands of alien warriors stared at their screens in disbelief. Their most powerful weapons had struck the human ship directly, yet it floated in space without a single scratch on its dark hull. Admiral Vex felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Fear. His 4 eyes remained fixed on the Reaper as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The small human vessel should have been nothing but floating debris by now. "Science officer," he barked. "Explain to me how that ship survived." The nervous Kethran checked his instruments again, his hands shaking as he worked. "Admiral, our sensors show the human ship absorbed all the energy from our weapons. It did not deflect the attacks or use shields to block them. It simply absorbed the energy completely." "That is impossible," Vex growled. "No material in the galaxy can absorb that much energy without being destroyed." "Sir," another officer interrupted, "the human ship is powering up some kind of weapon system. Energy readings are climbing beyond our measurement capabilities." On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison stood calmly before the main control panel. His fingers moved across controls that looked deceptively simple, but each button controlled technology that had taken humanity's best scientists 50 years to develop. "Ghost," he said quietly. "Target the nearest cluster of destroyers. Make it clean." "Targeting 17 vessels in formation Delta 7, the AI replied. "Entropy cannon. Charged and ready to fire." Jake paused for a moment, thinking about the aliens he was about to kill. He felt no anger toward them, no hatred. But they had chosen to threaten human civilians, and that could not be allowed. His finger pressed down on the firing control. The Reaper's main weapon did not fire a beam of light or a projectile like normal ship weapons. Instead, it released something far more terrifying. A pulse that traveled at the speed of light and affected matter at the most basic level possible. The pulse reached the 17 Kethran destroyers instantly. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship simply began to fall apart. Not exploding, not burning, but dissolving as the molecular bonds holding their hulls together stopped working. Admiral Vex watched in horror as 17 of his most powerful warships turned into clouds of loose atoms floating in space. The crews inside never had time to scream. One moment they were alive and preparing for battle. The next moment they no longer existed. "What kind of weapon was that?" he whispered. His science officer was frantically checking readings, his voice high with panic. "Admiral, the human weapon appears to have disrupted the atomic structure of our ships. It made their matter come apart at the molecular level." The communication channel crackled to life again. Jake Morrison's calm voice filled the bridge of every Kethran ship. "You have seen what one shot from my weapon can do. I am giving you one final chance to leave this system. Take your fleet and go home." Admiral Vex felt his pride burning inside his chest. He was the greatest military commander in Kethran history. He had conquered entire star systems and brought dozens of species under the Empire's control. He would not be intimidated by one human in one ship, no matter how advanced their weapons might be. "All ships," he commanded across the fleet communication system. "Concentrate fire on the human vessel. Every ship, every weapon. Destroy it now." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Nearly 100,000 alien warships turned their weapons toward the Reaper. The space around the human vessel lit up like a new star as thousands of energy beams, missiles, and projectile weapons struck it from every direction. The attack continued for 30 seconds. When it finally stopped, the Reaper remained exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. But now something new was happening to the human ship. Small objects began to separate from the Reaper's hull. At first they looked like debris, but as they moved away from the main ship, their true nature became clear. They were fighter craft, but unlike any fighters the Kethran had ever seen. The human drones were sleek and black, about the size of the aliens' own fighters but moving with impossible speed and precision. They did not launch from bays or hangars like normal fighters. Instead, they seemed to phase into existence directly from the ship's hull, appearing out of nowhere like ghosts. "Ghost," Jake said as he watched the drones deploy. "How many can we field?" "Current manufacturing capacity allows for continuous production of 1,200 drone fighters," the AI replied. "Each drone carries the equivalent firepower of a destroyer-class vessel." Jake nodded. The drones were another piece of technology that even he did not fully understand. They were built using matter manipulation technology that could create complex machines from raw materials in seconds. Each drone was controlled by a fragment of Ghost's artificial intelligence, making them faster and more accurate than any biological pilot could ever be. The Kethran fleet watched in growing fear as the human drones spread out across space. There were not many of them compared to the aliens' vast numbers, but something about the way they moved made experienced warriors nervous. They flew in perfect formation without any communication, turning and diving as if they shared a single mind. Admiral, his tactical officer called out. The human fighters are approaching our outer ships. Should we launch our own fighters to intercept? Yes, Vex ordered. Launch all fighters. Show these humans that numbers matter more than technology. Thousands of Kethran fighter craft poured out of the fleet's carriers. They outnumbered the human drones by more than 10 to 1 and moved to surround them completely. The alien pilots were confident in their skills and eager to prove themselves against the mysterious human technology. The battle began as soon as the two forces met. It was over in less than 5 minutes. The human drones moved through the Kethran fighters like a hot knife through ice. Their weapons were precise and deadly, each shot destroying an enemy fighter with no wasted energy. But more terrifying was their speed and coordination. They moved in patterns that seemed to predict what the alien pilots would do before the pilots themselves knew. Every time a group of Kethran fighters tried to surround a human drone, they found themselves flying into carefully planned ambushes. The drones would disappear and reappear in different locations, using some kind of short-range teleportation technology that made them nearly impossible to target. Within minutes, thousands of alien fighters were destroyed while not a single human drone was even damaged. Admiral Vex watched the slaughter with growing desperation. How are they doing this? He demanded. How can so few fighters defeat so many? His tactical officer was studying the battle data, trying to understand what he was seeing. Admiral, the human drones appear to be sharing information instantaneously. They are not fighting as individual craft, but as a single unit with multiple bodies. Our pilots cannot match their coordination. The human drones finished destroying the last of the Kethran fighters and began moving toward the main fleet. Their weapons were small compared to the battleships they were approaching, but after what Vex had already seen, he was no longer confident. That size mattered. Jake Morrison's voice came across the communication channel again. Admiral Vex, you have now lost 17 destroyers and approximately 8,000 fighter craft. Your remaining ships can leave this system safely if you withdraw now. Vex was breathing heavily, his 4 eyes wide with a mixture of fear and rage. Everything he thought he knew about warfare was being proven wrong by this single human ship, but he still had nearly 100,000 vessels under his command. Surely that had to count for something. Human captain, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You may have superior technology, but you are still just one ship. We will overwhelm you through sheer numbers. You cannot fight us all. You are welcome to try, Jake replied calmly. Admiral Vex looked around his bridge at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. Some looked frightened, others confused. All of them were beginning to doubt whether their massive fleet could win this battle. But Vex was the admiral of the Kethran Empire's greatest war fleet. He would not retreat from a single enemy ship, no matter how dangerous it appeared. All vessels, he commanded. Close formation and advance on the human ship. We will ram it if necessary. No single vessel can stand against the combined mass of our entire fleet. As his order was carried out, Vex wondered if he was making the right choice. But it was too late to change his mind now. The battle would continue, and one way or another, it would end soon. Admiral Vex stood on his command bridge, watching his massive fleet move into attack formation. The sight should have filled him with confidence. Nearly 100,000 warships advancing together was a force that could destroy entire planets. Yet somehow, looking at the single human vessel floating calmly in space ahead of them, he felt only growing dread. Admiral, his intelligence officer called out urgently. I have been reviewing our files on the human species. There are some disturbing facts we may have overlooked. What kind of facts? Vex demanded, not taking his eyes off the Reaper. The intelligence officer's hands trembled as he read from his data pad. Sir, our initial reports focused on human trade colonies and peaceful settlements. But I have found military records that paint a very different picture of this species. Explain quickly, Vex ordered as his fleet continued to close the distance to the human ship. Admiral, humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts like most species, but constant, continuous warfare spanning thousands of years. They have fought wars using everything from simple clubs to weapons that can destroy entire cities. Vex felt his stomach tighten. Continue. Their planet Earth has never known true peace, sir. While other species were learning to work together, humans were perfecting the art of killing each other. They have created weapons designed to destroy their own kind by the millions. The Admiral turned away from the main screen to look at his officer. Are you saying we underestimated their military capabilities? Sir, I am saying we may have made a terrible mistake. The reports show that humans do not build weapons to fight equals. They build weapons to fight enemies who are stronger, faster, and more numerous than themselves. Every human military technology was designed with the assumption that they would be the weaker force in any conflict. On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison was having a very different conversation with his AI companion. Ghost, he said quietly. Show me the tactical analysis of their fleet. The main display screen lit up with a detailed view of the approaching Kethron armada. Red markers appeared over dozens of ships, highlighting structural weaknesses and critical systems that Ghost had identified. Captain, the AI said in its calm, mechanical voice, the Kethran vessels are built for overwhelming enemies through superior numbers. Their individual ships are heavily armed but not heavily armored. They expect to win battles quickly through coordinated attacks. What are their weaknesses? Jake asked. Their formation tactics require ships to stay close together for maximum firepower. This makes them vulnerable to area effect weapons. Additionally, their power systems are not shielded against electromagnetic interference. Their ships rely on constant communication with their command vessel to maintain coordination. Jake nodded slowly. So if we disrupt their communications and hit them with the right kind of weapon, their formation would collapse into chaos and individual ships would become easy targets, Ghost confirmed. Jake walked to his weapons control station. The Reaper had dozens of different weapon systems, each one designed for a specific type of combat situation. He had used the entropy cannon to make a point, but now it was time to show the aliens what human military engineering could really accomplish. Ghost, charge the reality bomb, he ordered. Captain, are you certain? That weapon has never been tested in actual combat conditions. I am certain, Jake replied firmly. Target the center of their formation. We are going to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Back on the Kethran flagship, Admiral Vex was receiving more disturbing reports from his intelligence team. Sir, the officer continued reading, human military doctrine is based on something they call total war. When humans fight, they do not seek honor or glory. They seek complete victory by any means necessary. They are willing to sacrifice anything to ensure their enemies are completely destroyed. Impossible, Vex muttered. No civilized species fights that way. Sir, according to these records, humans once fought a war that lasted 6 years and killed over 50 million of their own people. They created weapons that could poison entire continents and bombs that could level entire cities. They only stopped when one side was completely unable to continue fighting. Vex felt ice forming in his veins. How long ago was this war? Less than 100 years ago, sir. By galactic standards, it was yesterday. The Admiral looked back at the human ship on his screen. Suddenly, the Reaper did not look like the vessel of a peaceful species. It looked like exactly what it was, a weapon built by creatures who had spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently. Admiral, his communication officer interrupted. We are receiving another transmission from the human captain. Put it through, Vex ordered. Jake Morrison's voice filled the bridge once again, but this time there was something different in his tone. It was still calm, but now there was an edge of steel beneath the words. Admiral Vex, Jake said, I want you to understand something. You think you are facing a primitive species with inferior technology. You are wrong. You are facing a species that has never known peace. Every weapon on this ship was designed by people who spent their entire lives thinking about how to destroy enemies who outnumber them. The human captain paused, letting his words sink in. We do not build ships to fight fair battles, Admiral. We build ships to win unfair battles. We build them assuming that we will be outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy who is stronger than us in every way. The Reaper was not designed to fight other human ships. It was designed to fight gods. Admiral Vex felt his confidence crumbling. What do you want, he asked. I want you to take your fleet and leave this system, Jake replied. I want you to go back to your empire and tell them that humans are not prey. We are predators who have been pretending to be sheep because we thought it would be better for everyone that way. And if we refuse? Jake's reply was immediate and chilling. Then I will show you why my species conquered our own planet before we ever left it. The Reaper began to change again. Its hull shifted from black to a deep red color that seemed to pulse with inner light. New weapon ports opened along its surface, revealing technology that looked nothing like the devices the Kethran recognized as weapons. Ghost, Jake said quietly. Activate the reality bomb. Target the center of their formation. Reality bomb armed and ready, the AI confirmed. Warning, this weapon will create a localized space-time distortion. The effects may be unpredictable. Fire. The Reaper released its most devastating weapon. Unlike the entropy cannon, which affected matter at the molecular level, the reality bomb affected space itself. A sphere of twisted space-time expanded from the human ship, moving outward at incredible speed. When the distortion reached the Kethran fleet, physics itself seemed to break down. Ships that had been moving forward suddenly found themselves moving backward. Vessels that were flying in formation crashed into each other as up and down became meaningless concepts. The tightly packed alien armada turned into a chaotic mess of spinning, colliding ships. Admiral Vex watched in horror as his perfectly organized fleet tore itself apart. Ships designed to work together in close formation became death traps as the reality bomb turned their coordination into catastrophe. Damage report, he shouted over the sounds of alarms and emergency broadcasts. Admiral, his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. We have lost over 30,000 ships. They were not destroyed by enemy fire. They were destroyed by colliding with each other when the space distortion hit our formation. Vex stared at the chaos on his screens. In less than 1 minute, the human ship had eliminated nearly 1/3 of his fleet without firing a single conventional weapon. The aliens had not been outgunned or outmaneuvered. They had been outsmarted by an enemy who understood warfare in ways they never imagined. Sir, his communication officer called out, we are receiving emergency signals from ships throughout the fleet. Many captains are requesting permission to retreat. Admiral Vex looked at the Reaper floating calmly in the middle of the destruction it had caused. The human ship was completely undamaged, while his once mighty armada was in ruins. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vex began to consider the possibility that he might lose this battle. Human captain, he said into his communication system. What are you? Jake Morrison's reply came back immediately, and the words would haunt the Admiral's dreams for the rest of his life. We are what happens when a species spends 10,000 years learning how to kill each other, and then decides to work together instead. Admiral Vex stood among the wreckage of his pride. The command bridge of his flagship was filled with the sounds of emergency alarms and panicked voices reporting massive casualties. Through the main viewing screen, he could see the twisted remains of thousands of his ships floating in space like broken toys. The human vessel Reaper sat in the center of the destruction, completely untouched. Its dark red hull pulsed with energy that made Vex's eyes hurt to look at directly. In less than an hour, this single enemy ship had reduced his mighty fleet from 100,000 vessels to fewer than 70,000. Admiral, his chief tactical officer approached with visible fear in his movements. The captains are requesting immediate retreat. Many ships are already preparing to jump to hyperspace without orders. Vex slammed his 6 fists on the command console. No, I will not be defeated by one primitive human ship. We still outnumber them 70,000 to 1. That has to count for something. His science officer looked up from his instruments with shaking hands. Sir, I have been analyzing the human weapons. Each one operates on principles that should be impossible. They are not just advanced technology. They are using physics that we do not understand. Explain, Vex demanded. The first weapon dissolved our ships at the molecular level. The second weapon manipulated space and time itself. Admiral, this is not merely superior technology. This is technology that treats the fundamental laws of reality as suggestions rather than rules. Vex turned to stare at the Reaper again. The human captain had been silent since the reality bomb attack, but somehow that silence was more frightening than any threat. What was the human planning next? On the bridge of the Reaper, Jake Morrison was studying tactical displays showing the remaining Kethran fleet. The aliens had spread their ships out to avoid another formation-destroying attack, but this had made them vulnerable in different ways. Ghost, he said quietly. Analysis of their current position? The Kethran have learned from our previous attacks, the AI replied. They are maintaining distance from each other and moving in unpredictable patterns. However, their scattered formation has reduced their combined firepower and made communication between ships more difficult. Jake nodded. What about their morale? Intercepted. Communication suggests that panic is spreading through their fleet. Many ship captains are questioning Admiral Vex's orders. The alien fleet is beginning to fracture psychologically as well as physically. Good, Jake said. But they still have the numbers to overwhelm us if they coordinate properly. We need to end this before they figure out a new strategy. Ghost paused for a moment, processing millions of calculations. Captain, I have detected something concerning. The Kethran flagship is charging what appears to be a planet-killing weapon. Their target seems to be the Terra Nova colony. Jake felt ice form in his stomach. They are going to hold the colonists hostage. It appears. So, Captain, Admiral Vex may be planning to force us into a vulnerable position by threatening civilian lives. Jake's face hardened. The Kethran Admiral had just made a fatal mistake. Threatening human civilians was the one thing guaranteed to make Jake abandon all restraint. Ghost, he said in a voice cold as deep space. Activate the phase shift drive. It is time to show them our final surprise. Admiral Vex watched his weapons officers prepare the World Breaker, the Kethran Empire's most powerful weapon. The massive cannon could crack a planet's surface and kill every living thing on it within hours. It was meant to be used only as a last resort, but these were desperate times. Human Captain, he broadcast on all frequencies. I am targeting your colony world with our planet destroyer. Surrender yourself or watch millions of your people die. The response came back immediately, but Jake Morrison's voice had changed completely. Gone was the calm, professional tone. Now there was something in the human's voice that made Vex's survival instincts scream warnings. Admiral, Jake said, and each word seemed to carry the weight of a death sentence. You have just made the last mistake you will ever make. The Reaper began to change in ways that defied everything the Kethran knew about physics. The ship's solid hull started to become transparent, like a ghost fading from reality. Then it began to flicker, existing and not existing in rapid succession. What is happening to their ship? Vex demanded. His science officer stared at his instruments in complete confusion. Admiral, according to our sensors, the human vessel is existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It is phasing in and out of our reality. That is impossible. Sir, the readings are clear. The human ship is now partially existing in what we might call parallel realities. Our weapons cannot hit a target that is not entirely in our dimension. Vex watched in growing horror as the Reaper became completely transparent. The ship was still there, still visible, but somehow not quite real anymore. It was like trying to grab smoke with bare hands. Fire all weapons at the human ship, Vex ordered desperately. Every remaining Kethran vessel turned their weapons toward the ghostly Reaper. Thousands of energy beams and missiles struck the space where the human ship floated. But every attack passed harmlessly through the vessel, as if it were not there at all. Jake Morrison's voice came across the communication channels again, but now it seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the human captain was speaking from multiple realities. You threatened human civilians, Admiral. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking that we built the Reaper with only 3 dimensions in mind. The ghostly human ship began to move through the Kethran fleet, passing through alien vessels like they were made of air. But as it moved, something terrible began to happen to the ships it touched. When the Reaper passed through a Kethran destroyer, the alien vessel simply stopped working. Its engines shut down, its weapons powered off, and its life support systems failed. The ship became a lifeless hulk floating in space. "How is it doing that?" Vex whispered. "Admiral," his science officer reported in a voice filled with terror. "When the human ship phases through our vessels, it is somehow disrupting their molecular structure from the inside. It is killing our ships from within." Jake's voice continued to echo through space. "The phase shift drive allows us to exist in multiple realities at once. We can attack you from dimensions you cannot even perceive. Every ship we touch will die, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." The Reaper continued its ghostly hunt through the alien fleet. Ship after ship fell silent as the human vessel passed through them, like a plague made of shadow and light. The aliens could not fight back, could not defend themselves, could not even run away fast enough. Admiral Vex realized that his fleet was being systematically executed. "All ships," he broadcast frantically. "Ram the human vessel. All ships at maximum speed. Even if we cannot hurt it with weapons, we can destroy it through collision." Thousands of Kethran ships turned toward the Reaper and accelerated to ramming speed. It was a desperate tactic, but Vex reasoned that even advanced human technology could not survive the impact of thousands of ships hitting it simultaneously. The alien vessels reached the Reaper's position and struck it from all directions at once. But instead of causing an explosion, the Kethran ships simply passed through the human vessel like it was made of mist. The aliens found themselves ramming empty space while the Reaper continued its work of destruction. "It is not working," Vex's tactical officer reported. "Our ships cannot make physical contact with the human vessel." "Then how do we fight something we cannot touch?" Vex demanded. "Admiral," came a small voice from his communication station, "I do not think we can." Vex stared at the tactical display showing his fleet. Red markers indicated dead ships, and the number was growing rapidly. The Reaper was systematically moving through his armada, killing everything it touched. At this rate, his entire fleet would be destroyed within the hour. In desperation, he activated his most powerful weapon. The World Breaker had finished charging, and its targeting systems were locked onto the human colony of Terra Nova. "Human Captain," he broadcast, "I am firing on your colony world now. Even if you destroy my fleet, millions of your people will die." Admiral Vex pressed the firing button, sending a planet-killing beam of energy toward the helpless human world. But as the weapon fired, the ghostly Reaper suddenly appeared directly in front of the Kethran flagship. The human ship had somehow moved from the outer edge of the fleet to the center in an instant. Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system one final time, and now it carried the promise of absolute destruction. "Admiral Vex, you just fired on human civilians. Now you get to learn what happens when you make humanity truly angry." The Reaper began to phase back into normal reality, but as it did so, something impossible happened. The human ship materialized partially inside the Kethran flagship, occupying the same space as the alien vessel's bridge. Admiral Vex found himself staring directly at a section of the Reaper's hull that had appeared in the middle of his command center. Through the transparent metal, he could see Captain Jake Morrison looking back at him with cold, merciless eyes. The human captain raised his hand and placed it on what appeared to be a weapon control panel. Vex realized with absolute terror that the Reaper's main gun was now inside his ship, pointed directly at him. "Goodbye, Admiral," Jake said quietly. The entropy cannon fired at point-blank range inside the Kethran flagship. Admiral Vex had one brief moment to understand what was happening before his molecules simply stopped holding together. The bridge, the command crew, and the Admiral himself dissolved into harmless atoms that scattered into space. The Reaper phased back to normal reality, leaving behind a massive hole where the flagship's command center used to be. The mighty Dominator, pride of the Kethran fleet, died instantly as its main power systems failed, and its hull cracked open like an egg. Across the alien armada, Thousands of ship captains watched their command vessel break apart. The sight broke, something fundamental in the Kethran fleet. Admiral Vex had been more than just their commander. He had been their symbol of invincibility. Now he was dead, killed by a human who had materialized inside his own ship like a ghost. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Reaper, watching the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet. Ships were breaking formation, some trying to flee while others fired randomly into space. The proud Kethran armada was falling apart as panic replaced discipline. "Ghost," Jake said calmly. "How many ships remain?" "Approximately 43,000 vessels are still operational," the AI replied. "However, their command structure has collapsed. Individual captains are making independent decisions without coordination." Jake nodded. The death of Admiral Vex had been necessary, but now came the most important part of the battle. It was not enough to simply win. He had to send a message that would prevent future attacks on human space. "Open a communication channel to all remaining Kethran ships," he ordered. "Channel open, Captain." Jake's voice reached every alien vessel in the system. When he spoke, there was no anger in his tone, no hatred. There was something far more frightening, the calm certainty of absolute victory. "Kethran Fleet, this is Captain Morrison. Your admiral is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. You came here with 100,000 ships, and now fewer than half remain. You have a choice to make." On dozens of alien bridges, ship captains listened, with growing fear. Some had already begun charging their hyperspace drives, desperate to escape the system. Others sat frozen, waiting to hear what the terrifying human would say next. "I am going to allow some of you to leave," Jake continued. "Not all of you. That would send the wrong message. But enough to carry word back to your empire about what happened here." A Kethran captain named Drex, now the senior surviving officer, in the fleet, found his voice. "Human, what do you want from us?" Jake's reply was immediate. "I want you to understand what you faced here today. You did not lose this battle because of bad luck or poor planning. You lost because you fundamentally misunderstood what humans are." The Reaper began moving slowly through the scattered alien fleet. Ships moved aside like frightened animals, unwilling to risk drawing the attention of the deadly human vessel. "Your intelligence reports told you that humans were a peaceful species," Jake said. "Young, primitive, weak. You were wrong on all counts. We are not peaceful. We have simply chosen to restrain ourselves because we thought it was better for the galaxy." On his bridge, Captain Drex checked his sensors and felt his blood turn cold. The human ship was heading directly toward his vessel. "Human captain, we surrender. We will leave your system immediately." "I know you will," Jake replied. "But first you need to understand what you are surrendering to." The Reaper stopped directly in front of Drex's ship. At this close range, the alien captain could see details of the human vessel that had been invisible from a distance. The hull was covered in weapon ports that looked like nothing in any database. Strange energy patterns flowed across its surface like living things. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Ghost," Jake said quietly. "Show them the manufacturing bay." A section of the Reaper's hull became transparent, revealing the interior of the ship. Captain Drex gasped as he saw massive machines working at incredible speed, building new drones and weapons from raw materials. In the time he watched, dozens of new fighter craft were assembled and launched. "The Reaper is not just a warship," Jake explained. "It is a mobile factory capable of building an entire fleet. If I chose to, I could stay in this system and construct enough ships to conquer your entire empire." The alien captain stared at the impossible technology. "How long would that take?" he whispered. "Approximately 6 months," Jake replied matter-of-factly. "But that would be wasteful. I prefer to solve problems efficiently." The Reaper moved away from Drex's ship and began systematically destroying other vessels in the fleet. But Jake was not killing randomly. He was carefully selecting which ships to destroy and which to spare, creating a specific pattern that would maximize the psychological impact. "I am destroying your largest and most powerful vessels," Jake announced. "Your battleships, carriers, and heavy cruisers will not return home. Only your smaller ships will survive to carry my message. Captain Drex watched in helpless horror as the human ship methodically hunted down the fleet's capital ships. Each attack was swift and precise. The Reaper would phase into normal space, fire a single shot, and watch another massive alien warship dissolve into atoms. "Why are you doing this?" Drex demanded. "We already surrender." Jake's voice carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. "Because your empire needs to understand the difference between defeating humans and making humans angry. Today you made us angry." The systematic destruction continued for another hour. When it was finished, exactly 1,000 Kethran ships remained out of the original 100,000. They were all small vessels, scouts, frigates, and light cruisers. Nothing that could threaten a human colony, but enough to carry survivors back to Kethran space. "Captain Drex," Jake said, addressing the alien directly, "you are now in command of the survivors. You will return to your empire and deliver my message exactly as I give it to you." "I will do as you command," Drex replied, his voice shaking. "Tell your leaders that humans are not the peaceful traders they believed us to be. We are a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against our own kind. Every weapon we build is designed to fight enemies stronger, faster, and more numerous than ourselves." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "Tell them that the Reaper is not our most powerful ship. It is simply the only one we thought necessary to send against your fleet. Tell them that Earth has dozens of ships like this one and hundreds more under construction." This was not entirely true, but the aliens did not need to know that. Fear would accomplish what treaties could not. "Tell them that if they attack human colonies again, we will not send a single ship to fight them. We will come with our entire fleet, and we will not stop until their empire is nothing but empty space and bad memories." Captain Drex felt sick as he imagined what dozens of ships like the Reaper could do to his homeworlds. "Human captain, surely we can reach some kind of agreement. The Kethran Empire does not wish to be your enemy." "That is exactly the message I wanted you to take home," Jake replied. "The choice is yours. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Attack us again, and learn what happens when humanity decides that restraint is no longer necessary." The surviving Kethran ships began activating their hyperspace drives, desperate to escape the system. But before they could jump, Jake had one final message. "Captain Drex, there is one more thing your empire needs to know. Today, you faced one human defending one colony. We have thousands of colonies scattered across the galaxy and millions of humans willing to defend them. If your empire is thinking about testing our resolve elsewhere, remember what happened here." The alien captain nodded frantically. "I will remember, human captain. My empire will remember." "See that they do," Jake said simply. The 1,000 surviving Kethran ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them recordings of the battle and the terrifying knowledge that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Jake Morrison stood alone on the bridge of the Reaper, watching the empty space where the alien fleet had been. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. Word of the battle would spread across the galaxy, and humanity would face new challenges. "Ghost," he said quietly. "Set course for Terra Nova. Let's make sure the colonists are safe." "Course laid in, Captain. Estimated arrival time is 2 hours." As the Reaper moved toward the human colony, Jake reflected on what he had accomplished. He had won an impossible battle and sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the weak, peaceful species that others could prey upon. They were predators pretending to be sheep, and today the pretense had ended. The galaxy would never be the same.